Vice President, you addressed matters relating to Nigel Hughes' conflict of interest as as AFC leader now during your press conference yesterday. The AFC held their press conference today. Mr. Hughes is still holding out that he could separate himself from being party leader and then having his legal interest. How exactly does that work?
Well, first of all, I think they went into panic mode. They did not realize that Nigel Lewis had this huge baggage and that he will take this obscene position. That is the leadership of the AFC. Uh, in an interview with Demerara Waves, he said that should the national interests conflict with his personal interests as a lawyer to ExxonMobil, his personal interests and Exxon's interests would prevail over the national interests. Now, this is a person who just got elected to the leadership of his party. In fact, the top position in his party. That is clear for every Guyanese to see. You can't walk that back. You can't undo that. That was done. It's in the full public domain. And I commend Dennis Chabral for asking him that question. And for I think it's incumbent on every Guyanese to read what he said there because it reveals the working of his mind. That national interests will come second to him in any situation where his money is affected. Then, yesterday I dealt with this at the press conference, and I pointed out that apart from what he said yesterday, when he was interviewed, that there are other things that he should answer for. So they held this press conference today, I think, to rebut what I said yesterday. And they dragged out half of the AFC at the press conference. Patterson started off by saying they will lead a moral revival in this country. This is disingenuous. It's coming from a person who's currently before the court, charged with two cases in two cases for corrupt practices when he was minister. Almost every member who was on that podium, or most of the members there, are involved in some corrupt activity that is publicly known. But the AFC will now lead a moral revival in the country. I spoke yesterday of recycle leadership, or recycle leaders. It's a party of recycle leaders. It's a corrupt cabal of recycle leaders who are accustomed to privilege in the past and think they can dupe the people of Guyana once again into electing them and returning them to the place where they enjoy all of these privileges and were engaged in the corrupt practices. Patterson said, it's very revealing to me what he said, actually, that they have 5,000 members in the AFC, but they only got 200 delegates. So that meant that one delegate represented 25 of their members at the Congress, recently held Congress. Now in the PPP, we have a ratio of delegate to membership of 3-1. Every party, every group can submit 1/3 of their numbers as delegates. They are saying 25-1. Now that number is fictitious. It's the 5,000 persons. Secondly, he said, we had a well-run Congress. It was a great Congress, huge turnout, packed house, and that our delegates could not all make it to Georgetown because the PPP is responsible for the bad road from Lethem in. But those delegates who made it to Lethem, they voted by phone. Now, how do you vote by phone call? I thought that the secrecy of the vote in an election is an inviolable principle of all elections. So how do you vote by phone? This is a new, and I wonder how they counted those votes by phone, and who did they call? Did they call Christopher Ram? Did they call Patterson? Did they call Sherrod Duncan? Well, I don't think they called him because he didn't get the votes. Or did they call Nigel Hughes and say, we're voting for you? And how was it done? So it's very interesting what they've said at the beginning of their press conference. It raises more concerns about their membership and about the conduct of the elections that were recently held. I've already said to you that they did a hatchet job on Sherrod Duncan, one of their own, by spreading everywhere that he was corrupt. And frankly speaking, Nigel Hughes has more baggage, 100 times more baggage in his closet than Sherrod Duncan has.
So,
but yeah, so I think the purpose, I spoke about how panicked they were. And so the entire press conference was called by Nigel Hughes. And he rolled out the other stooges, the Ramjatans and the others, to defend one point, that he must keep his contract with ExxonMobil whilst being leader of the AFC. And they all fell in line. That was the purpose of this press conference, nothing else.
Nigel Hughes as leader on what's happening in Parliament, especially among his own MPs. With this whole committee that Hughes hopes to set up, to set himself aside and not make any decisions, I'm still, again, lost as to how or if something like that can even work.
Okay, so I think the entire purpose of the press conference was to prove that Nigel Hughes did not have a conflict of interest. It was, and he failed miserably at that, at proving that. Secondly, it was designed to get this entire corrupt cabal to support him, to remain as leader, and at the same time continue to profit from a contract with ExxonMobil. So they had to do some fancy footwork. First of all, we were regaled with an explanation as to what constitutes a conflict of interest by Nigel Hughes.
Right.
He sought to define in his own way, conveniently, condescendingly, what a conflict of interest is, as though we do not, or the people of Guyana cannot understand one when they see it. For a person who said that when the national interest conflicts with that of his client, the client's interest would prevail. How could you be the leader of a political party that is, and you're seeking to be the presidential candidate for the elections, the upcoming elections? It's impossible. It is not only a conflict of interest, it is also immoral. It's immoral. It's obscene that you would even contemplate that. He has to have a healthy disregard for what the people of this country think to try to force this position on us. But he has these sycophants in the AFC, the stooges like Ramjatan, who will go to a press conference to try to support him on this matter. So a conflict of interest does exist, not only because he's a politically exposed person, which he was in the past because of his wife being a member of parliament, but now he has moved from an ordinary member of the AFC, or maybe not even a card-bearing member of the AFC, to the leadership of that party, where he has to play a role in determining the party's position in relation to oil and gas. So he now says, I will have no role. I will not play a role in determining my party's position. What sort of leadership will you give as a leader of the party? So he tries to comes today to say, oh, I will set up a committee with Vincent Adams and Patterson, two recycled persons from the sector. It was Vincent Adams who signed the environmental permit for Lisa 1, and Patterson, who knows very little about the sector. The only claim to fame for Patterson in the sector was when they tried to move the pipeline's location conveniently to an area where some private people had acquired land. But they have no skill in this area. They're just sycophants of Nigel Hughes. But let's think this through. So you have this committee, and they come up with some policy advice. They give it to the leader. So as leader of the party now, I will not speak publicly about the advice that my party gives me, because it conflicts with the interest of my client. So I will not advocate it. So I'm abdicating my responsibility as leader of the party. Secondly, his party is represented in the National Assembly.
Yes.
So he says, I can only influence government policy when I'm president, and therefore I'll resign when I'm president. But he is in a position to influence the government policy through the National Assembly. There are three branches of the government: the judicial arm of the government, the executive arm, and of the state, and the legislature. And his MPs are there. He can influence them now as leader of the party to vote on a legislation in favor of his client. So that is also a conflict. He is in a conflict of interest position there. And then he himself had said sometime in the past that, these oil companies can fund political parties and they can take over a country. So if now Nigel Hughes is the lawyer for ExxonMobil, so if he remains the lawyer for this company, and the company pays him for legal services, then what is there to say that this can't be a conduit for political contributions to his party? Because they can easily inflate the legal bill to give him funding for his political party. That he has not addressed this, because that's an easy path for political contributions, because Exxon is prohibited from making political contributions in the countries that they are operating in, except outside of the US. So this could be a conduit for political contributions from ExxonMobil.
It sounds like Mr. Hughes is banking on the public not considering
all of these things. And then, fourthly, he says, I've never handled this account. It's handled by Mr. Pollard. Now, Pollard is part of the law firm that he owns. So whether it's handled by Pollard or anyone else, the Exxon's account, he benefits from it financially when the proceeds come into the company because he's part owner of the company. So apart from him being politically exposed, a politically exposed person, these are all issues that we need to consider. And he wanted the country not to pay attention to any of these issues. That's why he had all of these sycophants surrounding him and trying to distract attention from Vincent Adams talking about metering now and somebody else. He didn't know about metering when he was at the EPA. They installed him at the EPA. And Patterson talking about something else, their moral revival. The entire press conference was designed for one purpose. It is to allow him to keep this lucrative deal whilst still remaining leader of the party. So we had pointed out also yesterday, I did, where in the Global Witness report that he lied to Global Witness. So he actually said to Global Witness, my tenure as chairman of the party did not overlap with Trotman's tenure as minister. And Global Witness actually just Googled it and they said it's a lie. Trotman was minister for 11 months before Nigel Hughes resigned as chairman of the party. And we now know, based on the Clyde and Company report that they commissioned, that the negotiations, the first negotiating brief, went from Exxon to the government of Guyana in May of 2015. So the fact that he resigned, yes, that the fact that he resigned in April, on April 11th,
next year,
that's 2016. All this time the government was engaged in negotiations with ExxonMobil. When he was the chairman of the party, and Trotman was the general secretary of the party. And that is why the Global Witness said there was a conflict of interest position there that required an investigation. He said, "Oh, I can. I'm open to a conflict of interest negotiation." I don't think he has to worry too much. I think Exxon has got more worry than him, because if it could be proven that the government of Guyana, their lawyer he was their lawyer, because in the PSA, the lopsided PSA and the bridging deed that were signed in 2016, his law firm was listed as the law firm representing Hess, Sinuk, and Exxon. So if they could prove that the lawyer had a relationship with the minister, they were part of the same party's leadership, and remember his wife was also in cabinet at that time, it could be very uncomfortable. It could get very, very uncomfortable for a large number of people. We are waiting on Exxon to see how they will respond to this issue, because and that would determine how we move forward with it. So we ignored the issue all these years. People would say, why not? He was politically exposed at that time. We knew his wife was minister. He was politically exposed, but he didn't have leadership in the party where he could have influenced the position on that kind of issue. So I wonder what they will put in their manifesto for oil and gas now, because
whether he will have a say in what goes into the
manifesto. He's saying, I can't have a say now. Wait until I'm president. So I will not put anything in my manifesto on oil and gas that will conflict the interests of ExxonMobil.
Sounds like the party membership should be concerned about something.
They should be concerned, and these sycophants who went to the press conference, they only purpose, the Pattersons and the Ramjatans and some of the others, their only purpose now in life is to get back to the positions of privileges and perks that they enjoy, the gold bangles and the gun licenses and all of that. So I would not pay them too much attention. They're just window dressing. They're just there to support a very, very clever but transparent attempt by Nigel Hughes to do both things, to enjoy both sweets.
I just want to briefly touch on something before we wrap up. This whole thing about the brief mention of moral revival. Does the AFC have the capacity, if you look at their political history when they were in government, does the AFC have the capacity to lead
Any
as they said, this
moral revival? And coming from Patterson, it didn't come from anyone else. A man, Patterson, wants to lead a moral revival. A man who we saw cussing up people, urinating on their fence, and then urinating on their fence, and then when the people protested, actually gave them a good cuss down. Then a person who has 2 corruption charges against him in the court now, a person who lied to the nation by saying he did not accept any gift from government agencies of gold bands because he didn't wear gold bands, and then everybody saw the picture of him wearing the gold band. He wants to lead a moral revival.
And then there was Mr. Hughes and the Video Mega production company.
And Cathy Hughes with Video Mega and all of that. Now, we saw before, you recall, so Cathy Hughes saying, if you Google now, you would go and see her saying to the media when asked, I think it was the Starbuck News, I have no relationship with Video Mega any longer. This was in 2016. The same position her husband is taking now. Oh, I will have that's my company, I'm separating myself from it, and I have no executive role in the company. Exact same thing her husband is saying now. Then what happened? In 2018, she was signing checks on behalf of the company. We have the checks. She was still involved. She was lying to the people of this country and to the reporters. It got reported. She was no longer part of the company that she said she had distanced herself. No longer part of the company. Exact same thing that Nigel Hughes is saying now. Exact same thing that Nigel Hughes is saying today. This is what we're confronted with. A party that is duplicitous, a party that Nigel Hughes himself presents himself as above board. When I spoke about the baggage that he has in the past, so he said, "Oh, I want them to investigate Jagdeo and Sue." Well, I think I was vindicated in that issue. A person came into my home in an unguarded moment with somebody I considered a friend and tried to bribe me, and they did not succeed. I wonder if that you had an AFC person there. They caught them on camera collecting a bribe. That was their purpose. That was the purpose of the Vice News entire presence in Guyana. It was called a sting, to find someone taking money for government policy, and they did not find that. So I think I came out vindicated. I have a court case now. But what about Nigel Hughes? Nigel Hughes removed evidence from the gas station when Brian Hamilton was killed by the bandits there. He took away the tape. Nigel Hughes, there was a call by, I think, Stabroek News and everyone else to have him being investigated. I saw a story in Stabroek News, but many are called for him to be investigated. When he was defending two of the persons who were part of the massacre of people at Lusignan, babies and everyone else. He was their defense lawyer. And the foreman of the jury was his client for 6 years, and he did not disclose it to the court. And the court asked if, at the beginning, when they were selecting the jury, if there was any relationship. That's called jury tampering. And his client walked free. Didn't disclose it. What kind of character is this? What sort of person? So they tried to present him as a new face and an erudite face. This was the guy who didn't understand that 33 is the majority of 65 until the CCJ wiped the floor with him in their decision. They wiped the floor with him and said, what kind of wherever in the world would someone come up with this stupidity? This is the person. And he's not new. He's not a new face.
I was going to mention that.
He is recycled. He was chairman of that party twice. In 2013, he resigned. 2016 as chairman of the party. Since when he is new leadership.
So you don't think he has that?
No intellectual capacity to deal with policy. He thinks that policy in the oil and gas is setting up a committee. At the end of the day, you have to have a number of people, policymakers, who make the call on where the committee goes. It's always like that when you get elected. Whether the technical people don't make the final call on legislation. That's why the laws have to go to Parliament and be approved by parliamentarians, politicians, elected politicians. They have to have positions. Whether it's an environmental law, it's a petroleum bill, the expanded petroleum bill, it's a local content law in the NRF, it ultimately has to go to the National Assembly. ExxonMobil would be happy to deal with a technical staff that they can bully. They can't bully me. Gramston said I'm a bully, right? But Exxon can't bully me. But they can compromise them. They can fetch them off to Texas and fet them, as the Global Witness report said, or write a cabinet memo for the government of Guyana to approve the PSA in 2016. Exxon wrote that cabinet memo. You think that would ever happen in a PPP government? It would ever happen? It would be so obscene, and that's what they defend, as though they're strong on these issues. So it is a major, major thing. I think Sherrod Duncan should look at these call-in voting that Patterson spoke about, voting by telephone. And Christopher Ram, I wonder if they called him as returning officer to say who they voted for and where is the secrecy of the vote. It's an interesting thing to deal with. Patterson just opens his mouth, and I think he put them in more trouble.
So what happens now?
Nothing. They would continue to dig in where Nigel Hughes' money is concerned. He will give up national interest. That's the morale of the whole story. The morale of the story, this guy is fighting tooth and nail to keep his lucrative deal with Exxon, whilst being in the leader of the AFC, in a position to influence members of parliament how to vote, and in a position where he could influence policy of his party and everything else. And it is a clear case of conflict of interest.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.